Good evening and welcome to our monthly live threaded Q&A. My name is Adrienne Garrison and I'm going to be your host for this evening. Threaded is an organization that helps people like you effectively bring the love of Christ into racial conflict and conversations. We know that the racial conversation can be a minefield, and so we created this space to help talk through some of the questions and concerns that you have. Joining me for our March live Q&A are Marcus Lloyd and Antoine Malone. How are you guys tonight?
Doing good, doing good.
Hello. We missed last month, and so we get to jump in for twice as long today.
We missed January.
It was
Is
January.
it January? We missed
Yeah,
January.
we were here last month. Maybe
That's right, we
maybe
were
some
here
of
last
these
month.
people, missed last month, but
Apparently,
we
Antoine
were
was
here.
as well. But
I am wrong
I
again.
thought I was here last month. But you
but
can tell me I missed anything, and I'd be like, I might have actually missed that. I don't remember everything. I can't even remember what I was doing.
that's right. We did do last month. What am I thinking about? But we did miss a month, doggone it. So I was half right.
It's water under the bridge. They're not holding us against us.
They don't care. They don't care. What's up, Mary? I think Mary's in the house. She says hello.
Mary?
Hello.
Hey, Mary, and whoever else is going to join us, go ahead and say hello. We love to see your names and your comments and such.
Yes,
That's right.
Let us know you're here.
That's right. Welcome in. Come on in. Check it out for sure.
At any point, you can drop your questions into the chat. We'll be seeing them live and responding to them live. We do not have a script for tonight. These guys are gonna be in the hot seat.
The hot seat. Yeah. Well, speaking of hot seats, it's Adrian sitting outside today enjoying
which is crazy to me.
Weather. It's wonderful weather.
This we're in Texas, so that makes sense. But Adrian, you are not in a place that usually is warm at this point in the year at all.
This is really great for Indiana mid-March, but I'm going to take it, and I'm going to try not to think too much about global warming. That's what I'm going to do.
Oh,
try to enjoy it. Just try to enjoy it.
Okay. That's good to know. I hadn't thought about that as well. But yeah, if you're feeling this 70-degree weather,
such a killjoy, that global warming. Like, don't make me think about that.
You're enjoying it right now.
You know what I mean?
That's all right. That's all right. It's good. Good to have you here for sure.
Yes. Well, as you guys come in, let us know you're here.
Yeah, most definitely. So we got St. Patrick's Day. So are y'all all St. Patty ready to go? Got your green stuff? Do y'all even care about St. Patrick's Day? Like, what's up with that?
You know what? Every year,
Marcus is like, if it ain't Juneteenth, I don't know what it is.
In it. No, but I was actually just talking about this at church on Sunday. Every year I'm surprised by St. Patrick's Day. Since I wasn't in like elementary school, you know what I mean, where they like make you color around it. Like I'm always surprised. I'm so surprised by it. We literally talked about this at lunch on Sunday. I hadn't thought anything about it, and when you said it just now, I was like, "Oh my gosh, is it St. Patrick's Day today?" And I still don't know. I think it's tomorrow, right?
It's tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, see, that's what I'm talking about. So, I have nothing against St. Patrick's Day. I just feel like
you know what, Marcus, you missed it. You missed it.
Fine.
And we're going an extra hour
because of me at the grocery store. You know, I just think, they must think I'm cute. You know, why are you pinching there? I don't understand.
No.
I don't think like circa 2022 you can do that.
I was about to say
that. I think it can happen to me.
Lisa come around the corner, dropping elbows, and that ain't part of St. Patrick's Day, not elbows. That'd be hilarious.
That's good.
I love St. Patrick's Day. When we lived in Chicago, they dyed the river green, and that's
did they really? Amazing. Are you sure they dyed the river green, or did it just turn green because of all the pollution?
No, I promise.
It's like living in Cleveland where they light it on fire. No, it just actually lights on fire.
The river actually did catch fire in the Great Chicago Fire. It was that polluted. That is so true.
That's hilarious.
Yes. Mary does not care.
They also rerouted it out of the lake because it was polluting the lake. They changed the direction of the river.
I want to say hateful things about Cleveland, but I love Cleveland, so I'm not messing with it. I went there this summer, and I can't say anything bad about it anymore because it's actually a beautiful city in the summer. Not anytime else. I can't imagine.
You don't mess around with
Mary. I see Mary. She said,
she don't care about St. Patrick's Day. She out on it.
She didn't want to be pinched. I understand you.
No green beers. I know green beer seems to be a thing for people to go and they have a
Got
thing.
my Canadian dry, like it's green. I should just keep this for tomorrow. Walk around with it.
I think he was a pretty cool saint, like legitimately a cool saint.
So yeah. It's a good story. VeggieTales actually has a 4-minute story about it.
Okay.
That you can watch somewhere. That I watched with my kids. Again, the last time I cared about, St. Patrick's Day, I guess my kids were watching VeggieTales. So
well,
anyway.
I'm sorry to our Irish audience that we're totally offending right now. Please excuse us.
That's true.
Well, I mean, I'm curious.
You are welcome here.
Is it indeed? You are. We will celebrate your holiday just like we will do Cinco de Mayo.
That's right.
But
which nobody claims, honestly.
How come all these are beer related or alcohol related? Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo was created.
I guess any holiday has alcohol associated to it. Oktoberfest is German. That's another beer thing.
Gras.
That's right. Mardi Gras.
What are we doing? America's like, you know what? If we don't know,
I don't think it's associated with barbecue.
Barbecue. I'm about to say.
It's just like Independence Day. It's both Independence Days are about barbecue, not about.
I just had the picture of Billy G. What's his name? Billy D. Williams.
Oh,
Billy D. Williams, the face of Juneteenth. Quote 45. Code 45. You invited to the cookout.
That's right.
Shouldn't say that. Is that wrong? Should I not say that about
Billy D?
My mom used to. Okay, we gotta get into real conversation. But my mom, we gotta do it. But my mom loved Billy D, so she was like,
"Well, of course she loved Billy D."
Everybody did. So when he said anything, she's like, "I don't know what he said, but he can say it again."
That's
kind of
thing.
thing.
Look, there were two guys that if any black woman ran into either of these two guys, like the black men would be like, "I understand." Like Billy D. Williams and Blair Underwood, right? Like, my mom literally met Blair Underwood at a show. He was doing a show with my sister, and she literally came onto him with my dad there. Like my dad was like, "Hey man, I understand. Like I kind of want to do it as well, right?"
Your dad's like, "Don't mind me. I'm over here.
I'm just here." So
that's a mess. That's what that is. Although there's got to be videotape of this. So next time I see your mom, I can.
That's good. Anyway, let's get into this because I'm sure
we absolutely should. Let me get you guys back on track here.
Get off of Blair Underwood and Denzel. And
I need to be Googling some of these things.
She's like, "Who is Blair Underwood?"
That's okay. If we showed you a picture of Denzel of him, you might enjoy that picture.
Okay, all right.
Well, I'm looking really hard for a segue. I don't have one, so
you
here
don't.
we go. You guys are doing a Let's Talk Race class.
Yes.
And we want to know more. This is coming up, and the specific question is, I can't make one or two. Can I get recordings? So give us a rundown on the Let's Talk Race class for anybody who's watching and isn't familiar. And then let us know how that's going to be put out, if there's going to be a recording available.
Well, the Let's Talk Race class, amazing class. We've just started with it, and I think everyone should, if you can make time to go to it and do it live or do it in class, it is right now the best experience because so much interactivity is involved with that. So much about the Let's Talk Race class is about making room for questions that are that you want to ask that you don't always feel safe to ask, especially for our white brothers and sisters who, for this conversation, you get into a race conversation, and if people of color are even in the room, sometimes that might prevent you from asking certain questions. And so with these Let's Talk Race classes, they're designed to kind of be, they're really safe spaces for those homogenous groups. And it allows an extra layer of safety to ask those questions. And if you're doing it on your own, you don't get a chance to ask those questions freely like that. And that's the win for, if you can, making some time to do it live. Which one starts or to start? You can still sign up for this Monday at 7 p.m. and Tuesday at 10 a.m. And so you can look at both those virtual. 2 things, both virtual. Yeah. And again, I can't recommend enough the sort of live actual experience. I think it's going to be the one you get the biggest bang for the buck. Right now, we're not recording them.
Well, we're not recording for anybody to have them.
Right.
But if you pay, you pay for it, and you have to miss a couple of classes.
Yes.
That's what we can do. but it's not one of those things like, hey, can you just send me all of them if I pay? That's not just if you
Right.
miss a couple classes.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense because it diminishes what we're hoping you get out of it.
Yeah.
But also, we're trying to create a safe container for the people involved. And so we have to be careful with those recordings.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's the other thing. However, there may be at some point in Thread's future a way to do a kind of go at your own pace version of the Let's Talk Race, and that's something that we are,
chatting about.
Yeah, kind of on the whiteboard of future potentials, and so there may be some time in the future where you can sort of do that on your own and kind of do it walk through. If honestly, I think if there was enough people who we really felt that would be the way they go, um, that might help us make that decision quicker. Right now, we're at a place where we have to use our best energy in the best places, and we've got quite a bit of things that are self-paced things between the collective and the things associated with it. And so we just want to make sure that if we put that product out there in that way, that it would actually be used and be effective. So thank you for your question and your thought. And I think if more people were to raise their hand, we might accelerate moving in that direction.
I think that's a great. I'd love to hear if anybody who's listening, if a kind of self-paced kinds of product, if you will, or classes, if that's interesting to you, because we're definitely talking about it. So you can just throw it in to the chat if you're like, yeah, I'm down for that, or no, I prefer the in-person kind of thing. Just we're just trying to get a sense of that, because there's lots of other things coming, and so we're just trying to figure out how to, again, put our best energy forward and allow for the most people to engage it as possible. So I'd love to, if anybody's in the chat, I'd love to see it, but otherwise, sorry, Adrian.
No, I was just curious if you had any offhand, if you could remember some of the things that got brought up in those discussions, if it's appropriate to kind of share one or two of those anecdotally, what are the kind of things that people are bringing to reckon with in these groups?
Well, Anthony, you just took it, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, so it's led by two of our great friends, Shelley and David Park, and they are, what they're doing is really, it's kind of a 101. It's a beginner's guide to sort of jumping into the racial conversation.
Like a
and
101.5. There's some stuff.
101. It is one, well, by the time you get to the end of it, it's not so 101 that you feel like, oh my gosh, there's there's definitely some challenge and such. But it's a lot of the baseline conversations, understanding terminology and understanding what people mean when they say certain things. So there's a lot of breakdown of what is white privilege, what is systemic racism, what is white fragility, what do people mean when they are speaking about microaggressions, and what does that look like? And they've just done that class has done a phenomenal job of bringing together resources from all kinds of places, more than you can probably even consume in any one time, to give you options for how to take your next step. There's something from a there's a podcast, which of course has multiple episodes that you could jump into, that they kind of say, hey, this is a great place to go. There's other really short videos that you can go and pick up and listen to and get moved forward and everything in between that. And so the idea is to, talk about these ideas, try to explain them in a way that makes sense without creating a lot of anxiety, and then allow people to step up and in. Into asking their questions. And so questions generally come around like those things, like how they, whatever the topic is, if it's white fragility or whatever the things are.
I love that. I'm so glad you guys made a space for that, because sounds like an amazing entry point. And if you guys are interested in signing up, you can go to wearethreaded.org/groups to get registered for those. Like Antoine said, they're starting next week. And that is the Let's Talk Race class.
That's right.
Yes. So sign up immediately.
Yeah, don't wait.
Well, I'm saying that because it starts Monday. So, we want to, and there's some emails we want to make sure you get out and what have you. Don't be afraid, to jump in right now, and I don't think it'll be time wasted.
No.
Yeah. Wow. Let's move on. We have just some recent news. Someone is referring to an article in Newsweek recently about a woman being called a racist because she asked a Black man in her community if he was lost. And we'd like to know what you think about that. Hello, Carol, by the way.
Oh, hello, Carol. Let's see. I think I saw that.
Hey, Carol.
I think I saw that this morning. It's a late. So a Black gentleman was in the neighborhood, kind of, I guess, standing. Her lady and her husband were on a walk, and they came up on this Black man who was standing in like the alley, kind of looking at his phone, and she asked him, "Do you need help finding anything? Are you lost?" And do you know where you're going? And he was like, "Yeah, I know where I'm going." And he kind of walked off. And then as he's walking off, he said, "By the way, that's racist to do that." And so she was fairly upset about that, kind of, trying to figure out what's racist. And in the internet, and if I remember the thing that drew me to that article, I think it said something about how the internet was divided on it. Right. And so so I'm curious, like, what our audience thinks. Like, do you think that situation, was she being racist? Was the Black gentleman, was it a racist situation? I'd be curious to hear. Walking up to a Black man who's looking at his phone in your neighborhood, a predominantly white neighborhood, and asking if they're lost. Is that a racist thing? What do you think? Do you think that's what I mean?
Oh, what do I think?
Well,
I thought
we can throw it out to the folks. Just
see
Mary,
what
Carol,
the people
what do y'all think there? What do you?
Yeah, I mean, there's that question, and there's the question of why do you think he said that?
Why do you think he said
that? So that, which is slightly different, right? Because is it a racist act, and then there's why does he feel like it was a racist act? Like why do we think what was he thinking? When he received that. So two slightly different questions, but anyway, the answers may be the same. Anyway,
well, I mean,
something could be something and be perceived incorrectly, or vice versa.
Not enough info. I did. I am not able to add to the comments here, but I did drop that article link in the private chat. If one of you guys could move it over into the comment section. Sorry about that.
Sure, I'll do that. No, I'll do that.
Just in case anybody would like to scroll through that, because Mary is saying not enough info, and I totally get that. And Elizabeth is saying everybody is touchy. Everybody is a little touchy right now in general.
It's not completely true.
Yeah. Well, so if you're that guy, what he's probably, I mean, everybody knows. I'm about to say what everybody knows, right? Everybody knows that the guy is thinking, that the lady is thinking that he doesn't belong there in the neighborhood, and that he, that he doesn't live or doesn't live where she lives. And so his thinking, he doesn't think that another person who's not his skin color, a white person walking down maybe with his phone out, would have been asked, "Are you lost?" He's thinking that he's being asked that, and other people wouldn't. And that's why I would say, my opinion, that's why I say he would say it's racist. It's racist to think that what he would probably say is how quickly she moved to concluding that maybe he was lost, or at least racial, a racialized way of thinking. So there's that part. I would also probably land in the camp that it's probably not racist in the way that we think about. It's probably if it is, it's potentially a micro aggression, a subtext, where she may not even realize that if it was another person of another race, she would not have asked. But the problem with saying all of that is we just don't know, because that we don't have a comparable scenario where another person who's white is walking down the street with their phone out, and where she would be given the chance to ask that. But And she was probably, in her brain, she's like, I'm trying to be helpful. So racism has with it the attachment of being hurtful or being a stigma, a negative. And she's like, how could I be racist if I'm offering him help? It's probably what she's thinking, like I'm trying to do something positive. I'm trying to help. And I misunderstood the situation, but I'm trying to be helpful. And his thinking is, why do you think I need help? What made you think that I needed it, and why did you land there so quickly? So it probably could go either way. Even with I need to look the article myself, but I'm with Mary. There's still not enough context.
Yeah,
but I could probably see where both angles come from.
I think it's very interesting from what it looks like. It looks like, the information came to the internet from the woman, and I think that's very interesting.
She wanted to try to find out.
She was upset at being branded a racist.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, that's a big word these days. It's got a lot of weight to it, and I think, and to the point, and I'm kind of looking through the article as well, and I think even the point you just made, Antoine, is kind of towards the end of the article. There is the question of if this was a white person, would that happen in a predominantly white neighborhood? You know what I mean? But again, the term racist is a heavy thing. There's probably another term. There's another term that could be utilized in the midst of that would probably help this understand. Like there's you could call it a bias, right? It's this fundamental attribution error bias. Like when you see somebody who looks like you in the space where you are and you belong, you have a bias to believe that they belong there. They belong there because you're there, right? And so that's when you see somebody different, you ascribe different meanings and intentions to the things that they do because you have a bias against them because they're not the same as you, right? The same as me bias. And so you see a person of color in your predominantly white neighborhood, you might go, are they lost? I think that could probably happen to anybody in a predominantly white space. I would imagine even myself, if I'm in my neighborhood and I know everybody, I know pretty much everybody in my neighborhood. I know of them or I know them personally. And I know I am the only Black man in the neighborhood, right? So if I see a Black dude walking around on his phone, kind of looking at something, I'll go, hey man, can I help you with something? Because I know he ain't here because I know I'm the only one here. And so I'd probably ask the same question. But to the point is, again, if I saw a white person walking around my neighborhood, I would just chalk it up to, well, maybe somebody new moved in that I don't know who that is, right? Or they're coming from the neighborhood next door that I don't know that neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that can be packaged in nicety that is not, and maybe consciously she was thinking, well, maybe he's lost, but also, and I don't know, I can't speak for this woman, but I think there can be things packaged in something that looks like nicety, but is actually like, hey, Black man in the alley, I see you there. Just so you know, I see you there. So you are seen now.
Right. And so in case something happens, I saw you, I'm a witness. Can I get one? But here's a question I would push back though. Let's throw a hypothetical on it.
I like hypotheticals.
So let's hypothetically say this woman is absolutely not racist and that she absolutely would have said that to anybody. Let's hypothetically, right? I'm not attributing it to her. I have to say it like 3 times because Antoine just doesn't want to. Whatever, I get accused about things. He also makes a very quick assumption. The article's about how quickly maybe she may have come to an assumption about him, right? But he very quickly makes an assumption about her. There's lots of reasons why she would have asked a question, but he jumps quickly to the assumption that she is only asking him because he's Black and that she's racist. Is he being racist in his rush to judgment similarly to her? Would he have said that to her if she were a Black woman and asked him that question? If we throw it in the other direction, what do you think?
So I guess the question becomes, how are we defining racism in this moment? You know what I mean? Is it purely in this sense of the negative intentions? Is it the is it race? Is it, well, I always talk about racism and racists differently. Racism I attach to systems, racist I attach to individuals. So the question becomes, is he being racist, right? Is he making a particular call or an assumption about a person because of the color of their skin, right? And so in that kind of you know, framework of race, of what a racist response is or comment is, then yes, he's assuming because she's white and he's black that she is saying something to him because he's black and she's white, right? So both of them are acting with this understanding that there is a difference between their skin color and there's a difference between value, and so he's assuming it. But what that doesn't do is it doesn't account for the fact that somebody's got to call it out, right?
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't
think,
account for that. So that's where it gets a bit tricky.
yeah, I think that if we are calling someone a racist and objectively what they have done is racist, like is an example of racism, that doesn't make the person calling the person a racist themselves. So until we can agree on, like, for example, like if there was a blatant act of like police brutality toward a black man, and the news is calling that policeman like a racist, and
Mhm.
there's objectivity here, that doesn't make whoever's calling it a racist regardless of their skin tone, right?
Mhm.
So until we can like decide objectively whether this is racism on her part, is it fair to call him racist?
Well, I'm all I always use the example of like my children, if they're upstairs, let's just say my children are upstairs fighting, right? And they, you know, my oldest, you say my oldest, and I got my youngest, right? So my oldest comes down and said, you know, child two, Solomon for this case, Solomon hit me. And I'm like, hey, you're not supposed to hit your brother, right? That's wrong. We don't hit. But then Solomon comes down and says, yes, but he had lit the dog on fire. And I was trying to get to the dog to put the dog out, and he wouldn't let me get to the dog. So I hit him so I can get to the dog, put the dog out on fire. Right. And it's like, well, they both did things that we objectively go, you shouldn't do, but one of them did it in such a way as to protect this animal, right? To stop the
Right.
wrong. Right.
Right.
So that's where it gets tricky for me, where I go, I'm not gonna victim blame, if you will, because
Yeah.
the man was the,
But
if you will, the
but
victim.
but the issue the issue with that, which I agree with what we shouldn't victim blame, but but all those comments presume that she was indeed racist. My
Right, like
hypothetical,
Adrian was saying.
my hypothetical was that she isn't. The
Mhm.
idea is that she literally was outside, saw him, thought, maybe he needs help. Legitimately asked, hey, would have done it if he was white or black or otherwise in this hypothetical, because people like that do exist, right? Not everybody
Mhm.
who asks a black man who's walking down the street is racist. So in this hypothetical, if she is not that, and she very well may not be that, right?
Mhm.
It gets just the optics could look really terrible. His rush to judgment is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's interesting
Would then would make him racially motivated before she was, I think.
what it says in the article is that he called out to her saying, "Hey ma'am, that was really racist." And the way that the media and slash the woman, like, I don't know, has sort of altered this is that he called her a racist.
Mm.
And there is a difference,
It's a good distinction.
between
Yeah.
what he said, which is that what he meant was, I experienced what you just did as a racially charged interaction just now, which you can't really argue with someone if they experience something as a racially charged interaction versus,
One was accusatory and one is informative.
yeah.
He's informing her, in case you didn't recognize what you did could be seen as this.
That
Right.
Mhm.
Now that what you just said is different than you are. So I think
Mhm.
I think you saying,
Yep.
hey, be careful with that because that looks
Mhm.
like racism. And you could be misunderstood as racism because racist people would do what you just did. And she might be like, oh no, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. I literally was just asking, let's just say, but telling someone, hey, that can be perceived as racism.
Yeah,
and
he
saying
said that was racist.
Okay, so then what's
that was
racist?
Really racist.
Yeah. So what I worry about in our conversation that can cause not the hesitancy for progress is that whenever there's a white and black interaction, if the black person is on the wrong side of that interaction, racism is immediately attributed. And when that happens, it dilutes, I think, our ability to really call out the racialized things because everything becomes racialized, which is really, really hard to prove and set in. And so I think I just think we have to be careful. It's like a, if you're going to throw down your race card, you need to make sure that you are throwing down that race card. Now, this happened probably just one-on-one and didn't expect to get into the news and all this kind of business.
Well,
but I just think that we have to be really.
Yeah, she
did. Yeah, I don't know how it happened.
She brought it there. She
took it to the news.
She said, "I can't believe I was called a racist for this."
So what she's saying to the news is, he's racist for telling me I'm racist.
No. That was your.
I know she's not saying that. No. I know she's not saying that in the news, but what I'm saying, what she's upset about is that in the same way that he feels judged by her, she feels judged by him incorrectly. They both are feeling the same, prejudice, if you will, about who they are and expressing it. And it does make for a really tough scenario, but I'm just thinking it through.
If only there were some kind of process in which you could evaluate whether what was happening, this outcome where this gentleman was being ultimately he was being asked whether he needed to go someplace, and this woman is being called racist. If there was only a kind of system or process or practice or like a theory out there, maybe where somebody was working to analyze how race affects
social behaviors,
social interactions, social laws, even because again, these kinds of things eventually may go to law, right? So I don't know. It's weird. I feel like it'd be great if there was something out there that
we just have to we have to call it something else now.
Well, I mean, if you are aware of your biases, if you've taken, maybe something like the Harvard Implicit Association test and you're aware you have some biases, or just aware, like by nature of living in this country, you probably have some biases, then that can create, hopefully, eventually, like a filter where you're like, what is bothering me about this situation? And would it bother me if?
Yeah. And the sense of that is, you have to, and I was doing a little tongue in cheek before because it's very much like what critical race theory does ultimately. But to your point, you can't know whether what you're doing has these racist motivations if you shut off the idea that you may be a racist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think everybody needs to evaluate. I think black, white, brown, whoever, we need to, for me, and that's just me personally, I just assume that I am a racist that needs salvation, that needs to be changed, that needs to grow. And so whenever an interaction happens, and if someone was to say, man, that was racist, I have to go, you know what, I am capable of that. Let me evaluate that and take a look, right? As opposed to just go, I'm gonna go to the internet, somebody called me racist, this is not racist. I'm like, well, I grew up in America, which is a racialized society. It's one in which I have been indoctrinated, even as a black man, with white supremacy. It's very easy for me to act upon that indoctrination at any point. So, okay, let me evaluate it.
Man, I'm here for all of that, and don't hear me like pushing back, like in the sense that
you're creating a good combo here.
Yeah, that I don't. But I also think it's true that white and black people could have an interchange where one is made to feel uncomfortable, and racism isn't the cause of that. And I just think we have to be careful about it. If he were my son, I would say, listen, man, that wasn't even worth saying.
Yeah.
Because by you saying that, you it's too deniable. You're not going to be able to prove that you're not winning anything with that. And I would just be like, hey, you just gonna have to let that one rock. It's the unfortunate reality, and let's wait until there's something bigger. Now, that's because it's not provable, and I would rather save my black card for a meteor. My race card. Sorry, my black card. Yeah.
It's like, good for your black card is. I mean, you can.
I need my. I gotta have my black card. Well, sometimes
you can't even have you can't do the race card.
Doing. Listen, this is what I'm talking about right now. I might have somebody looking to confiscate my black card, but I would rather save that for a meteor matter, and there's too many ways to look at this interaction to let her off the hook, even if she is racist. She could just easily say she isn't, and what are you going to do about that? So and it's really hard for us on the outside to say, man, that's absolutely racist. What I would say about it is, I can understand why he might feel, feel attacked racially with that question, but I don't think that conclusively means that she is racist, which is why I broke the question up into two ways. I broke it up to start with. There's what is actually happened, and there's what he felt. And I don't want to get away from the fact that if what he felt isn't real, then there's a reason he felt it, which came from a prejudgment on his side as well, that he might need to deal with, because black people cannot move forward if we cry wolf. And I'm not saying he's crying wolf, but if we continue to do this, it won't help us. And so we've got to be able to manage that somehow. I don't have the rules and don't know how that works, but
sorry, Adrian, you look like you were gonna.
Well, you guys are really lifting the hood on this for us. I mean, as a white woman, I'm listening to this and I'm saying, like, well, at what point then? At what point is it worth responding to? And if you're socialized to pick your battles, and even always giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, when, let's be honest, that's not happening to you at least half the amount of time it's happening, that you're offering it to someone else, that creates gaslighting, that creates all of these things that just become baggage that you can carry around with yourself, always questioning these microaggressions. I mean, I still I've lived in many cities. I've traveled in many cities. I've never been asked if I'm lost, even when I looked real good and lost. I think generally people don't care if you look lost. I think that there's a lot that can be packed into, are you lost? Like, are you lost? You look lost. I
real quick, I'll let you go, Marcus.
Burden.
Yeah, I'll say this because I was joking before that I went walking today in my own neighborhood and walked up to the gas station and got myself some Big Peach. Shout out to the Big Peach drinkers if y'all know what that's about, right? But anyway, I went up and I walked back and I found a shortcut. Like normally I'd walk in the front of the houses and there's the sidewalks and such in the front of the houses. And I found the entrance to the back of my house. The back of my house is there's a green belt or whatever, just kind of back there. And I was like, ooh, I can shave about 15 minutes if I go back this way. And so, but it would have meant walking by a bunch of other houses' backyards, right? So, and I couldn't help but think, if I walk down this backyard as as the black guy here, am I going to get questioned? And so I have my hand, I had my ID actually out in my front pocket, ready. I pulled it out of my wallet, put it in my front pocket. This is today. This is 2 hours ago.
Right.
And walked to my house, to my own backyard, past like 6 or 7. But I was just ready, just in case somebody was like, hey, what are you doing here? And then I would raise my, hey, I live here. I live right down there. I was walking to the store. Here's the bag of junk food I just bought. I'm just going there. And it didn't happen, but I can't say that I didn't think about it. Now, had someone actually asked me that, they may have asked me that because I was black. They may have asked me that because They didn't know who I was. They may have asked me that because nobody really walks back here, right? And so those two experiences could be colliding, but I would have probably thought, had they asked me, you asked me that because I was Black.
Yeah. And
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And here's the thing is, this is, again, it goes back to the evaluation. These aren't isolated incidents, right? These are not just these things that happen they're in a vacuum. The decisions on both parts in this particular situation, the decisions are made because of the evaluation of history, right? We've got receipts across hundreds of years that have consistently created this situation over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so it's so much easier if you can take it out of the isolated incident and put it in and drop it in history. The probability of the idea that she's asking him if he's lost because he's Black, it's more probable based on receipts that that's what's happening, as opposed to he's just assuming she's racist and she's not.
Right.
Now,
and
the
Mary
assumption of
brought
racism,
that up. Yeah.
and thanks, Mary, for doing that. And the assumption that she has done something racist, that may be overblown potentially. But the fact that into your category of what you're talking about, that he's assumed racism or assumed a racist thing, and that she's not a racist, the probability of that is just smaller. It is a probability, but it's smaller. And I'll use it like this because I know, Adrian, you're responding like my wife does. And if I can say it, white people have a hard time with this. They can't imagine a world in which something happens to you and you can't do anything about it. Right?
Well,
like,
as a
you
woman,
can't
I can actually imagine that quite well. But but I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying white people, so not just you. But in this mode, even in this conversation, although there's intersectionality between you being white and being a woman, there's also this space of this whiteness that which you hold onto, that can also be part of the frustration of, shouldn't I be able to do something about this? And I see this in my wife all the time. And again, yes, as a woman, there's absolutely aspects about that. But as a white, if I can put that into the space, the whiteness part of it is what inflames, I think, this sort of injustice piece in the midst of it. And a lot of times you hear Black people going, okay, this is not the moment to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that is frustrating because we all want to be able to have that sort of feeling that you're responding to and that other people respond to. Well, man, why can't they just say something? Why do they have to do this? It should be. But again, going back to the idea of receipts, we have receipts that tell us that actually doesn't change anything. It doesn't get me what I want, doesn't change anything. And so you have to play a different game. So in my experience, to the point that you asked, where you're like, well, when do you say it?
Yeah.
You have to build a case.
Right.
You have to build a case. So in my experience, and this has been my experience over the last 7 years, there have been things that have happened to me, isolated moments that I would go, I think that's a racist thing that they just did. Now, I didn't bring it up because I also know that you can't just bring it up whenever, right? You got to build a case. So what I did is I kept a little file. When certain people did certain things, I go, okay, this feels like a racial thing. I hold on to that. This feels like a hold on that. I just want to check. Let me just, does it work out over time? And there's this point happened, and this happened this happened to me, where somebody did something to me, and it'd been over several years. There's all this stuff. And another person came to me and they said to me, I don't think that makes them racist, Marcus. Now, I didn't bring it up. I didn't bring it up. But when he brought it up, I said, well, actually, let me tell you about the other 8 things that have happened over the course of the last 3-4 years. And here's the date. Here's what happened. This is what they said. So with all of those things, they seem to be consistently happening to me in this particular situation. So there's more of an opportunity that this is a racist thing, a practice of being racist, as opposed to just a single incident. This is, I think, what Antoine's talking about. Is like, hey, hold on to that, son. Don't just go at that. Like, unfortunately, this is the frustration about having to survive as a minority.
Right.
You got to make it count. You don't get to just bring everything. You gotta.
And that's what I was trying to point to, is that this is part of the weight. Like, you're lifting the hood and you're showing us. This is part of the weight of being a minority in this country, is that you have to carry things around until they're deemed big enough, and like you're questioning yourself, and that is like has a psychological and emotional toll on you that's going to impact other pieces of your life. That just makes it harder to be a person of color in this
Sure.
country. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't like that. I mean, I think that when that's been one of the most painful parts, one of the more painful parts of hearing stories from people of color when they share their stories, when I hear them talk about that internal battle of, was this racist? Because I shouldn't jump to that conclusion, that kind of gaslighting thing when they have someone close to them saying, I don't see it that way, or it's not worth it. That seems very painful. It's like
Yeah.
that doubt is hard.
And what's tough about that, Adrian, is because you carry, Black people are carrying, people of color are carrying that kind of thing a lot, biting their tongue, as you were. By the time you do say something, someone's going to try to do what you're saying. Like you're saying, gaslight, you make it seem like you're just being ridiculous, or make it seem like you can't see what you did, but right? Because you've been holding, you've just been biting your tongue all this time. By the time you say something, you really are at a place where you don't want to hear a whole lot about what it ain't, because you've been biting your tongue for so long. You haven't been talking about everything the whole way.
And then they're going to call you an angry Black man.
Right. They're going to say, oh man, you have no self-control and all this. Like, I don't have self-control. Like, I have all these other reasons
10 years
to have.
More,
I have all these reasons to have lost control, and I didn't lose control, but you don't know about that because I didn't lose that control.
I hate
that. So by the time it comes out, it is when it's challenged the way even it's been challenged in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really frustrating because someone's telling you that you're being emotional or acting out of some sort of impromptu
aggression,
rashness, and in reality it's this informed buildup that has come, that finally someone pulled a rock over the volcano and a little bit of lava seeped out, you know what I mean, as opposed to the whole, you know what I mean. So and you're going to tell me that that's a blow up. You're like, no, there's way more to blow up if we really wanted to have a thing. And so that's the part that is frustrating, but it is true. Like, I think, at least for me, and I would say for my children, I do tell them, I say, listen, there's a lot of things you might have to just bite your tongue about. Come tell me about that stuff. Come tell me about that. Tell me what happened. Let's discuss that. Let's discuss how you navigate that. But if we're gonna bring accusation to someone, we better make sure we can make good on that accusation. Otherwise, we lose. We have no benefit of doubt in that conversation. And if I say someone's racist and I can't prove it, I ultimately lose. And not just me, but I lose it for so many other Black people who get to do that. And so let's just make sure we can't afford these. Tell me that she was racist when you get home, and then
it will be interesting to see if maybe Gen Z is going to be doing it differently, though, Antoine.
I hope so.
Perhaps.
I think we have this like court of public opinion now. We have
that's exactly
cell phones. We've got this situation.
Absolutely, and you hope for that
expectation, and
you hope for that. You hope that nobody likes living like this.
No, I can't imagine.
Living and this goes back to, we talked about it before, Dr. King's negative versus positive piece. Right? Negative piece is that everything looks good, but there's this rumbling underneath the surface. What we're talking about is the rumbling that's always underneath the surface. It
has been for decades.
Flame that's under, but we never deal with that until something happens and the gas gets poured on it, and all of a sudden there's this huge fire. And everybody's like, where did this come from?
Right. George Floyd.
Here, right? And so what you have to work is you have to try to create a positive piece in which you are engaging in work, conversation, whatever it may be, in which some of this stuff gets to eke out and we see the positives of it. And that can be done whether, again, conversation or work, or it can be just actual like fairness and justice happening, right? When we see things like what happened with the Ahmaud Arbery case, where these gentlemen who what we would probably say from a Black perspective and other perspectives, that it was a clearly racist act of bias, right? If that comes back and those guys don't get convicted, it just creates a rumbling underneath. Actually, probably more gas on that rumbling, and that's just. And I would even use the gas in the fire. I heard a word. I think it was. It may have been. I can't remember who it was who said this, but I like the way they articulated this. Instead of thinking of it as riots, right? Because that's what happens. Ultimately, you got this something happens and all these people, let's call it in certain neighborhoods, maybe it's predominantly Black, that they're quote unquote rioting. They said it's not rioting, it's rebellion, right? It's years and incident after incident in which they've been holding back, and they finally got pushed to the point where they're like, I'm rebelling against this system that continues to create these kinds of situations in our life, that continues to ask me to sit back, not respond. I can't take it anymore. I've had what Popeye, I've had all I can stands. I can't stands no more. Boom. Now we're into this thing where people are yelling and screaming and protesting. The thought of it being a rebellion against an unfair society as opposed to just an irrational rioting. You know what I mean? It's an expression.
Oh yeah. So look at the Boston Tea Party. Look at like all of the things that were, happening like circa Revolutionary era. Like we weren't calling that a riot. We're not calling it a riot now. It's just,
No, those are patriotic acts of freedom and liberation.
Right.
And they don't use liberation, they just say liberty, but same.
Sure. Yeah. And if you're sitting there thinking that your liberties are being withheld and your freedoms to live in which you don't have to bite your tongue, freedom to live where you don't have to tell your kids, okay, don't say that because that's going to do this and we can't have that. The freedom to live in such a way that when you are with your kids or something happens with your kids at school, that you can go in there and say what you want to say, as opposed to going, I don't know if this is the time, because if I come in there, because this happens to us, this has happened to me. If I go in there, babe, this I'm telling my Lisa, babe, if I go in there right now and we do this is it. This is the thing. It's got to be perfect. I can't just go in there, because if I go in and it's wrong, you were saying this, Antoine, from then on, they won't listen to me if I come in anymore. And they may not listen to other Black people. So I've got
absolutely,
particularly if you're the only, and this is the piece I push to a lot of times. When you see the first or the only person of color in the space, the biting tongue, right? The holding back is even more, it's an even a larger amount. And it's the thing, I remember talking to this about when I was at my previous church, and there was a lot of rumbling about, Marcus, your tone in the midst of the George Floyd situation, your tone, and what I'm trying to articulate to them is like I have been holding this stuff back. I've been engaging and having a lot of this stuff happen to me for years in this area, in my neighborhood and whatever, and this. And if you truly think that what's happening is an injustice against you and people like you, then it only makes sense that there would be a tone of frustration and even, if I can say it, anger. And you should recognize that that's not coming from, again, just some idle thing, but it's this buildup. And so to your point, Adrian,
and it's a buildup because it's a foolproof. For George Floyd, it's how can you deny that? So finally you have a way to talk about what you've been wanting to talk about.
Right.
In a way that feels
with everybody else.
That feels undeniable. And so now let's have this conversation. We can all have it now. Let's do it, because there's no way you're going to be able to deny this. And then some people deny it anyway. Now we can move off of this, but it would be helpful to think through a more healthier way to address the situation without letting the woman get off, but also like, what would be the healthy response? Now, again, we don't know all the details. We don't know I don't know if the man lives. I haven't read the article. I don't know if he actually lives in that neighborhood or doesn't live in that neighborhood, who he was visiting. I don't know anything about any of it. Right. So, it's hard to give like the foolproof, bulletproof answer. I would venture to guess, though, if he did live in the neighborhood, I think one way to do that would be maybe even to go on and do whatever he was doing. Revisit, though. Come back, knock on the door.
Are you lost? Are you in front of my door?
Right in front of your house. Hey, I was just wondering if you was no.
You just broke every
is this? I'm not speaking this from an authoritative point of view. I'm sort of asking the room this. Like, does it come to place where you like, hey, you come, you knock on the door, you know, Miss Susie comes out, you say, hey, the other day I was walking, I'm your neighbor, I live right up the street. I was walking doing this thing. You asked me if I was lost, and what I wanted to do was help you. What you said could come across as racist, and open that conversation. Is that too weird? Is that silly? Is that abstract? Is that like not the right move? You know, how what do you guys think? Like, what is a more healthy way to call her out?
As a white woman, all I know is you know where I live. And you're here to show me that you know where I live.
That's enough.
And that's a man of any color. A man of any color.
Hey, I hear you, Adrian. That's why we asking the question. I love it. But I know where you live because you talked to me.
Yeah, there it is.
No, not in the circumstance that we've been given. But in this article, she's walking home. She passes an alley.
That's what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's walking home.
Yeah, with her, she and her husband.
He is walking home.
Yeah, see, I didn't know what the deal was. Okay, all right. I thought she was like in front of her house. See, that's what I got to read all the things.
So it's a good question. If because I've had to do this multiple times.
The healthy way to deal with it.
A healthy way in a relationship. It's always been good to kind of go, yo, I don't know if you know this, but what you just said, if you say it, and as I say, if you say it to anybody else but me, they're going to think that was a racist thing. Now, I don't think you're racist because I know you. You're my friend, right? That's kind of the kind of the bringing down. Everybody gets neutralized, but I just need you to know this is why this is racist. Here's what it's racist, and here's why this is sound racist. And I give them the receipts, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that." But for the stranger, I'll give you an example, right? I had, and I think I've said this maybe even here before. I was at a particular restaurant that Lisa and I like to go to, and I'm sitting at the bar with Lisa, and we're just waiting, we're just having a drink, we're just hanging out. And I'm over there and I'm kind of rubbing, I'm kind of doing this with my hair. I'm just kind of, messing with it and kind of whatever. Long these, the dreadlocks. And this white lady, this white man walked by, she's older, and she stops and she goes, "You can't run your fingers through your hair." And in microseconds, because Lisa and I had to talk about it, I had to figure out, like, how am I going to deal with this? Do I call her out? Do I make a scene? I can't make a scene. If I make a scene, I'm in this restaurant, this area, I can't make this scene. So I got to do this. I'm with a white woman, so this could go the other way. And if I'm ugly to her, then she'll think, "Oh, black people are like this. Okay, so what do I need?" This is microseconds of just thought process. Sure. And I go, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, your hair texture doesn't allow you to run your fingers through your hair." And I said, "Have you ever had this hair before?" And she goes, "No." "Oh, no, but my daughter has hair." "Is your daughter black?" "No." "Oh, so she has, what does she have?" "She has these twists." And I was, "Oh, okay, well, it's not the same." She goes, "Oh, but you can't do it." I said, "But I'm doing it like right now." I'm doing it right now. She goes, "Oh," and you could see like Lisa, my wife, getting stressed. And I think her husband was like, "Come on, honey, let's keep it moving." Right. And so in the moment of that, and this is what I don't like about it, is I had to try to figure out how to do it in a way that I wasn't going to get myself in trouble, wasn't going to get turned on me, but I tried to at least ask the question, "What do you mean? Have you ever had this hair before? What?" And if not, okay, so how do you know what it's like?
So weird.
Right. It's extremely weird, but it's the question. I respond with the question back is, if I was lost, if they were saying, "Hey, are you lost?" I'll go, "No. Why do you think I'm lost?" "Well, you're sitting here looking at your phone." "Oh, I was just checking something on Twitter." You know what I mean? I'm not lost. I've been here a lot. In fact, I live down the street.
See, this is the case. This is the case building, because what you're doing, what you're really doing, is asking enough questions for them to reveal where they're coming from.
Exactly.
You're waiting for them to hang themselves, if you will,
without hanging you.
Yeah. So, maybe we shouldn't use that term, but yeah, we're waiting for them to reveal themselves. And so, yeah, it's you reminded me. That's what I do too. You go to asking questions like, "Well, yeah," or if I'm not going to ignore it. But that's a great way to do it, because initially that first initial, "I think this is racist," just often isn't enough to write it. You need to keep.
Yeah. There was this totally awesome guy a few thousand years ago who, when he was people were trying to trap him with some questions, he also responded with some questions. So I think it's a good blueprint.
There was a guy. Yeah, we know a little bit about him. His name.
I think that Carol was saying she doesn't advise going and knocking on a lady's door.
She was speaking the wisdom that everybody was speaking. She's like, don't be knocking on people's door talking about what they talked about. You trying to get yourself killed? What? That's what my mom would have said. What you trying to do? Don't make me have to come down there with you. If it was my son, and we did live in the neighborhood, I would take my son down there. I'd say, hey, this is my son, Elijah. You saw him walking and you asked him this. And I probably would do that as a parent to my child. I would do that.
If you had a legitimate way to know where she lived.
Yeah. If we're in the neighborhood, I'm just assuming I'm living there, right? Yeah. All that. But in a scenario where we don't even know any of that, then the only thing you have is the interchange. Honestly, I probably would have just ate that and kept it walking.
Yeah, and kept it moving, and then come and call me about it.
Yeah, I was probably like, "Hey man, guess what happened?" We would be talking about it on this show as an experience of Antoine. That's what we'd be talking about. Look, that is still alive and well.
You're letting the hood up. I like that analogy you're talking about, Adrian. Like, you have to understand that just because nobody says anything to you, just because a person of color doesn't say anything to you, doesn't mean that something hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. Because we do talk about it a lot. And this is what people would say. They go, God, I feel like everything with you is about race. And I think what people don't understand is there are so many encounters that seem to point to the fact that I am racially different than whoever is in the situation.
Yeah.
There's so many of those that we find ourselves like mulling it over, talking about it. We're having to talk ourselves off of stuff, right? Like, okay, it doesn't mean this. It doesn't mean this. I'm still like going, I can still do this, right? Like I'm still like, but we talk about it a lot because it happens a lot. And so that's where I think if people understood, and this is again, from a perspective, this is where you hope that when people are listening to something like what we're talking about, and this happens not just with Black people, this happens with others, right? Like if you go and hang out with,
I think Adrian was talking about women. Like I think
women, yeah,
I think ladies do it all the time. Tell each other.
Yeah, can you believe what this? Well, I'm not going to speak for Adrian. She could probably tell you herself. They probably do. Yeah. But I know for us, in that sense, that's why we're talking about race all the time, or thinking about. It's because we're thinking about it and trying to analyze the world we live in. And trying to see where do we fit? Is this another example of how we don't fit? And how do we now have to adjust our environment, our behavior, so that we can survive the next day?
Right.
That's the question. That's why it's on our minds all the time.
And you're combating confirmation bias as well as not allowing yourself to be gaslit. And the two things, sometimes it's really tough to tell the difference between giving someone benefit of the doubt and confirmation bias, you thinking something is real that isn't, but seeing something and making that proof. And those two things are just tough mental spaces to be in. And I think Black people have been kind of dealing, or people of color have been dealing with navigating those things for a long time. And like I said, Adrian, I think I'm not a female, obviously, but I can imagine that there's a similar type of way that ladies have to interface in corporate America and in other spaces where they're having to navigate whether what was said was sexist or not. It sure sounded sexist, but it's in the gray. Can I say that it was sexist? If I do, they're just going to deny it, and then now I look like the blah 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 that they think women are, and so maybe I'll just wait. Like I think that navigation is shared.
It's so messy, and you're just always trying to not set off. You're trying to not trigger this out of other people, right? So like when you talk about rehearsing, like what happened, like first of all, you're kind of talking about vetting your experience with someone who you think could help you tease out like what was going on there, and you're also kind of sharing this experience to be like, how can I learn from this so that this doesn't happen to me again? Because it was awful, it was uncomfortable, it was, but unfortunately what is true is that this is their problem. This is happening out there. And so simply by being in the world, you are going to set off these triggers in other people because it's them, it's their problem. You can't avoid it. And I think that is, I think we're more aware than ever how frequently this is happening. You've talked about how frequently this is happening. I think we're more aware than ever how frequently this is happening. And what is that awareness doing to people like this woman, you know, who was sensitive enough to take it to the internet, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the question becomes, so you're right. I mean, you got people walking around and everybody's now walking on eggshells, right? Because if you say this about so-and-so, this person, then that could do this. You say this about this could go this way. And I think part of the reason why people are walking on eggshells is because there is this mode of I'm going that everybody's ready to fight for whatever it is. And again, I think there's opportunities for that. But I also think that there are opportunities for people to sacrifice the comment for the sake of progression, for the sake of not just, you know, we all get along, but for the sake of humanity in and of itself. I think there's aspect. I think about Christ, like he took a lot for the sake of humanity. That's not everything. But that's why we talk about grace extending, like maybe not sacrifice, but maybe grace extending, just like, you know, if you, it's like if you're thinking about we talk about, this is kind of two people who are battling, you know, if one person punches one person, then the next person punches back, then the person who punched before goes, oh, I guess a punch wasn't enough. Let me punch and kick you. Okay. And the next person punch and kicks back, and they keep escalating. Oh yeah. Well, you know what? I guess, you know, dropping a missile on you is not enough. Maybe I need to drop a nuclear bomb on you. Oh, I'll drop one on you. Right. Like, where does it stop? So, and this is where I think the Christian really comes into it. This is why I thought, and this is, again, it's not, some people say this is not your grandmother's civil rights movement, right? That kind of thing. But this is where I think Dr. King was so like perfect in the mode, and why sort of a religious leader, a faith-rooted thought process and how we go forward with this really is helpful. Because again, to your point that you made a comment on earlier, Adrian, there was this dude who came 2,000 years ago who had the power and the ability while he's on the cross to call down a legion, an army of angels to, as my wife always says, to smoke the joint. Could have done it. And he chose to allow grace. He chose to be sacrificial. And because of that decision, the world was saved. Right? He wasn't, but the world was saved. And so I think that there's part of that. Now, here's, again, people would say, well, Black people have been sacrificing since the very beginning. Well, maybe that's our honor at times. And when it's not our honor, it's not our honor. Right? And other people have done it before. Like, maybe that's one of the wonderful things we get to bring to the conversation. And honestly, if we had not taken that honor, and I've said, America would not be even where it is now, right? Like it wouldn't be where it is. The democracy of America was created because of the work of Black people, predominantly Christian Black people, who were moving things forward, who were speaking out when they needed to, but also taking the hits when they needed to, so that they could bring everybody to the table. Dr. King's whole method was, I'm going to go out in public and I'm going to get beaten up on camera. So, because I believe in the humanity of the American people, American white people, that when they see people not fighting and getting beat up, that they will go, something is wrong with the situation that we're looking at. The problem we have now, and this is where Gen Z, I think, could learn something, is when we fight back, people lose. When we fight back in certain ways, they lose. We lose the moral ground, if you will. We lose the opportunity to go, no, we did nothing wrong. This is what we saw during George Floyd. We saw it immediately in our space. Everybody watched the video. Everybody's like, oh, this is the worst thing. And then all of a sudden you have all these people who are protesting and doing it right. But you had all these other people came in and started, you know, tearing down stuff in a bigger rebellion. They started doing these things. And again, we talked about that there's anger and all these things going forward, but it immediately let people off the hook. Oh, I don't have to care for them anymore because they're destroying business. They're destroying capital, right? You dealt with capital in a capitalist society. They're destroying capital. I don't have to be sorry.
And everything you're saying is tough to hear if it's tough to hear, period, Christian or not. It's really, really irrational if you're not following Jesus, because there's no model. Jesus is modeling that, and therefore setting that extremely high standard for us that we are still, you know, trying to get some hops to get to. And but other people, that's not the standard. The standard is that I must fight and defend for myself, because if I don't, then I will be destroyed. Jesus says your worth, your life, all of that is settled in eternity. And therefore, this stuff can be given away for the greater good to show who I am to the rest of the world. And so what are you fighting for? You're fighting for this life, or you're fighting for their eternity and mine. And there's a difference between the two things. And so when Jesus says love your enemy and does all these different things, and the things that Marx is talking about, it becomes a very high standard for everybody to jump to, and nonsensical for the non-believer. But this is where the black, white, and otherwise Christian church should be upside down from the world, should be countercultural, swimming upstream, whatever pictures you want to apply to the fact that we're no longer fighting for survival. We're living out salvation, and that is a difference, right? And what does it look like to do that? And what does it mean to be a part of God's kingdom and not this one? And so forth and so on. And call, work for justice and peace and goodness while doing it the Jesus way, right? And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we all have, and trying to figure it out.
Including the white woman. She also very much had an opportunity to turn the cheek there. Like if we're like Antoine, and we can assume the best about people, which I'm not. You're that many steps closer to Jesus than I am, Antoine.
No,
but if we can assume the best out of her, and she really was just worried he was lost, she also had an opportunity to turn her cheek, and she didn't. She brought it to the internet.
True. So, right. This was saying everybody could have just shut up. Now here's the thing. I'm just an argumenter. What's that? And so what I do is I just jump to the opposing point of view and try to understand it so that I can defend myself against it. And so that's what I often do, even when in our conversations with color code.
It's like such a rich conversation. I do want to try to squeeze one more question in, but if you're joining us today, if you're watching along, this is such a rich conversation, and you should know that Threaded also has a free online community where you can post the news article that is blowing up your brain, and we will talk to you about it any time of the month. You don't have to wait till our live Q&A. So go to wearethreaded.org. You can find our free online community. You can join it and post your questions there. We've had questions come up, how to navigate things that are happening at church, the workplace, etc. So that's a really good thing to know about. And now here is
and Adrian, as you're looking for that last question, just to say, it's not just us, right? Like you get more people, right? Because we're just two. There's one idiot in the room, and you got two other people who are fantastic. You could decide who the idiot is. I wasn't pointing out.
Whatever.
No, but there's all these other people
Marcus.
in the community that can all bring these other perspectives that help the conversation even become more robust. So that's just the thing too.
Yes, we like to see a dialogue. We are 1 year out from the shootings in Atlanta that predominantly impacted Asian American women, and the question is, do you think that Asian Americans have it worse in this country than Black and Hispanic people? Oh, I think there's plenty of that to go around, isn't there?
That's part of it. I don't know if you can put is it worse, right?
Yeah.
What I would say,
careful with the Olympics of the
Well, and what I would say is you probably, if you look at some of the ways in which we deal with racism in this country, there are dials that get turned. I think anybody who's, and I'll say it like this, anybody who's not necessarily, well, I'll say it like this, everybody gets a dial turned on them, right? Depending. I remember when I was, when 9/11 happened, one of my best friends was, he wasn't even Middle Eastern. He was Indian. But for most people, that doesn't even matter. Like if it's a brown person, and I remember we were sitting back, like hanging out one day, and I remember he was telling me something that happened to him, already as a brown person after 9/11. And I said, well, I guess it's your turn then for a little while. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, you're going to turn the dial up on you. And we saw a lot of anti brown people, whether they were from the Middle East or whether they were from South Asia, whatever, we saw a lot of that hate go up, crimes and things of nature. And I think we're in a COVID mode right now, where a lot of the COVID got blamed on China and other spaces. And so again, you're in a country that we say Asian American, we don't say Chinese American, we say Asian. So everybody's Asian, right? And so and so even if you're not from China, like if you look like quote unquote Asian, you get attacked about that, right? Because even those shootings, those were Koreans,
women.
right? So yeah, so I don't know if it's a sense of, do they have it worse than us? I think there's definitely a targeting, has been a targeting of Asian Americans in multiple ways over the last couple of years through the pandemic, that you could say is more is the dial has been turned up more so than maybe we've seen on Black communities and Hispanic communities. You can see when you get to talk about the borders, like you saw, we had a guy from our area of town who went down to El Paso and shot up a Walmart because of the immigration, right? So again, I think dials get turned up. So,
well, yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Anton. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so the question in my brain breaks up into two different ways, right? So I think when it comes to sort of racism, or the way racism shows up in society, there's this sort of responsive energy, if you will, and there's this sort of assertive energy. So there's the energy that's like, I'm gonna be racist and I don't need any prompts to be racist. I'm just racist, right? And there's other racism that shows up as a result in response to something. What we haven't seen as much we haven't seen a lot of assertive racial energy toward Asian Americans in America as we have seen toward Jews, Blacks, and Hispanics in modern history. Now we have some of it, right? But I'm not saying it's absent. I'm saying we haven't seen that kind of, if you go to a alt-right rally, what you're not seeing is we don't like Asians, but you might hear them say the Jews will not replace us, or you might see anti-Black language, right? Or anti-immigrant, Hispanic language.
Sure.
You don't hardly hear that assertive, they've just inserted that group into the mix kind of language, that assertive thing. So I would say on that end of it, they don't seem to be as on the top of the crosshair list of those groups of people. However,
consistent rumbling.
What's that?
Are you talking about like a consistent rumbling of racist engagement?
Yeah, like I said, like the white supremacist
negative racial engagement,
right? The white supremacist organization, like if you were to sit down long enough, they might slip in Asian, but that's not on the top of their list. Like they're not known for speaking out against Asians. They're known for speaking out against Blacks, Jews, and Hispanics. Now, the responsive version, I think they don't have it any different than anybody. The white man does not want to be the bad guy. And whoever labels the white man the bad guy, in my opinion, whoever labels the white man bad guy becomes the top of their S list. And so if that's the white woman, you got a problem. If that's the Black man and Black woman, they got a problem. Hispanic, they got a problem. If the Asian community was raise their hands and say, you know what, we don't think that we're being treated fairly. We think that there's racism in America, and we're all going to, they would then become, in response to that, the target of a lot of racism. And so I think in that sense, they would get no breaks, where it pertains to responsive racism. But this assertive racism at the moment, they're just, in my opinion, they're not in the main crosshair of those people. And that's what I would say about that. But that's not to say that there's no racism toward Asians. And I think there's I think there's tons of that. And I don't want to I'm not trying to, real quickly, I want to make sure I say this. I'm not trying to dismiss anyone's experience, and I'm not trying to say certain groups matter more. I'm just merely reflecting the fact that Asians are not often the group that's actively and loudly spoke against when we look at the assertive racist.
Yeah.
And I would articulate that piece that you said, actively spoken against, is key, because what I would say is that if you were to articulate Asians are utilized to promote the continuance of racism, right? They are utilized as, okay, this is the model minority. They are pit against other folks. And so there's a kind of racism that happens in just saying, well, I see what you guys are doing, but what about these? What about the Asians, right? And again, if you talk to the Asian community, you'll hear a lot about just the frustration and the uh, I'll just use the word frustration and anger even about that particular even label. But we'll see them used as like a tool to allow people to continue in their racism without feeling bad about it, right? So that would be, I don't know, Adrian, you got anything to add to that?
Well, I think you can always spot white supremacist thought lurking anywhere when you get scarcity involved. And this question hinges on the notion of there's only so much compassion or awareness to go around. There's a limited amount. And so, Black and Hispanic people, are you willing to give some of that up to the Asians? I mean, I think that that's lurking underneath this question. And, white supremacy is based upon this idea that there is a limited and a finite amount of resources, and white people should have access to and should keep access to the bulk of those resources. And so I just really, it has been interesting. I think questions like this have trended kind of throughout our discussions where it's phrased in a way, it's like, Black people, can you handle like letting other people, like acknowledging other minorities suffering? And I think the answer from you guys is always like, yes, absolutely. It's blatantly obvious. But I'm concerned with how like even thinking this way perpetuates white supremacy in a way. It's like, well, I'm a white person. I'm doing my best. I really want to understand what it's like to not be white. I'm trying to educate myself. And I've been doing some work. I've been trying to understand, historically, like how Black people have been mistreated and abused. And I'm getting there. And now you want me to learn about how Asian Americans are the target of hate crimes now? Like, what's next? I don't know. This is how this feels and kind of just resonates in my heart. Like when I hear this, and it's okay. You're on a journey when you're thinking this way and you're asking this question. But there's always like deep complexities to this. You guys have done an awesome job articulating many of them, but how about the fact that it is, by and large, I think I heard a statistic today, something like 4 out of every 5 Asian American women feel that they have experienced a racial encounter. And why is it women more? And how is that connected to our time in Vietnam, our time in Korea, the exploitation of women by US soldiers, all of these things? And then add that to the pandemic and the sense of threat. And I know, Antoine, you oftentimes use that verbiage of like the white person or the white man, like he doesn't want to believe that he is the bad guy. And so whoever's labeling him that is who is his problem. But I think it starts with the white person. They don't even need that person to label them. It's just whoever they see as a threat. And the act of labeling is going to be the threat, and is going to target the wrath. But really, it's not the minority doing the labeling that is the starting point, the epicenter of the problem. The problem is like where the power is held, and that any kind of assertion, push against the power or assertion of one's worth and dignity is perceived as a threat by that power.
Yeah. And what I also want to say, because I said this a year ago, because literally when this happened, we were doing the Threaded conference and we had Soon Chan Ra in our conference that day, who is Korean.
Right.
And we were like, bro, okay.
You need to talk about this.
You need to talk about this. How do we talk? Like, help us do this. And one of the things that and you just mentioned it, Adrian, you're like, hey, what about the exploitation? Well, I think other minorities have exploited Asian women as well, right? And again, we talked about, some 2 Live Crew, some stuff back in the day. And that's where I would, if I was to give anything, as I was to go, it's not just, although maybe at the very end, it's the white man. I think that other people of color have done things to Asian and vice versa, right? That's what we have to recognize, is that everybody's capable of this kind of racism. And there's a part of it too, particularly if you are, and we've seen that this idea of crabs in a bucket, you know what I mean? Like whoever's at the bottom, like they're trying to pull everybody else down so they can get to the top. There's aspects that have happened with that. I mean, I grew up in a space where I knew Black people who didn't like, and I'll say it because I'm in Texas, because these cats were from Mexico, Mexican people, not just Hispanic, but Mexican people, for the reasons that poor white people didn't like Black people, because they were taking the jobs and the things that they were dealing with. And so it happens everywhere. And so, yeah, I think everybody gets it from a lot of different sides.
Yeah.
And who always benefits from the notion of that scarcity? Who always benefits from that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
To see things in that scarcity mindset is a choice that we have, especially when we serve an abundant God.
Say it again, because it's an extremely important thing that the church has to recognize.
Well, I was about to say, is the church, there's the church, and then there's the
actual,
the not church, that are in this conversation. Yeah, the people who they don't know scarcity. God's scarcity. No, for them it's a jungle, and it's survival of the fittest. And to climb that higher I can get to the survival hill, the safer I'll be, and everybody else down there in the valley, y'all can battle it out and figure that out. Right. And whoever gets close enough to the top of survival hill, we just might have to shoot y'all down, which is kind of what you're saying, Adrian. Anyone who threatens that. So that's good work.
But that community aspect, I mean, if you go back to Acts and you see the church created there in Acts, one of the things it says is that nobody had any need among them, right? They were sharing everything. And that was the promotional aspect. Is that people couldn't believe that these folks would, in the midst of scarcity, that they could live. That
was the upside down.
That was the upside down. So what happens with, at least in when stuff starts happening where there's this presumption of scarcity, right? Oh, can't get gas, everybody runs to the gas station, or COVID's coming, let's get toilet paper. You need a community of people who say, I don't need to go do that because I know that there are people, if I need it, I can get it. Right. And like, even in my neighborhood, people are like getting toilet paper, and some people going, hey, don't get toilet paper, I got plenty. Like, we don't need to do that, because if anybody needs it, nobody's going to need that much toilet paper. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to be okay. Let's just do it. But
we were so confused. Bless our hearts. We were
all the toilet paper is residing in this one neighborhood.
Oh my God.
He's got a garage full of toilet paper.
And
then the neighbor got a garage full.
The only reason they win is because somebody told them that it was a scarcity.
That it wasn't enough. Yeah.
We didn't have enough.
And that scarcity equals survival. Or whatever, and the response is, oh, we got to survive. And now all of a sudden that commodity becomes valuable. Again, good. Anyway, there's a whole philosophy around why fear, death, and survival, which is all the product of sin.
That's it.
Is the problem where we get to heaven. If you don't have sin, you don't have fear, you don't have death, you don't have a fight for survival. And now it's easy to give yourself away because you're not really worried about not existing, losing, being at the bottom of the food chain. It's easy just to be for everyone and everyone be for you. Only when you fear death and you fight for your survival do suddenly scarcity have such a hold on you.
Yeah.
It makes me think, is that one of the, I'll say it this way, is that one of the criteria for being allowed, if you will, into heaven? I know people are like, no, it's Jesus, he's got to do all. Yeah, I know that, but is that one of those things that shows us in some ways if we are truly saved and truly giving our life to Jesus? Because if you're in heaven and you got people there who are worried about whether they're going to have, then it creates a new scarcity there. So it's got to be people who, right? It's got to be people who have said, everything I have is for anyone. It's got to be people who have a communal thought process. Right. They have to be able to look at other people and they're not threatened by them. I'm not threatened by you because I have Jesus. Like, I'm not threatened by you. That's what heaven becomes.
It's why Jesus can say, lay down your life for your friends. Like, this is the mark of who I am. Yeah. It's why Jesus can say, this is going to be the mark of the kingdom on earth. It's going to be that you love each other. What does that love look like? It looks like giving yourselves away, and you go to Yeah, the places you were
Give
going.
myself away.
Yeah, but okay, but
I
good
do
stuff.
love, yes, and I do love how Threaded models that in very, very practical ways in everything that you guys do. So thank you so much for your time tonight, Marcus and Antoine. Thank you all for joining us. It's been such a good evening, and we'll be back again next month. We would love for you to head to wearethreaded.org/collective and join our collective community. It's a monthly membership where we get really rich webinars and great discussion happening in there, great resources. And you can check out Color Commentary with these two guys wherever you get your podcast, and follow Color Commentary on YouTube. Next month, like I said, we'll be back. So be on the lookout for details. And
real quick, Adrian, make sure you like on YouTube. You guys have done a great job. We're at 50 and we're at 80 now. We got to get to 100 so that we can be youtube.com/wearethreaded. They won't let us change our name until we get 100. So if you haven't liked us on YouTube, go and do that. You'll have to search it.
Subscribe now immediately.
Yeah, go to YouTube and in the search bar, put Threaded Live Q&A. It's the best way to do it because there's lots of threaded things, which is what we're trying to solve. And then you'll see our deal, and then you can like it. Hopefully you can do that.
Show us that abundance, people.
All righty.
Bye, guys.
See you guys later. Have a great evening.